From district to district, moving through the waters to Cayman Bracken, Little Cayman. Your station, your voice. All things Cayman. One radio, many people. This is home.
Radio Cayman in the Cayman Islands.
Money Sense is brought to you by the Chamber Pension Plan. For further information, visit chamberpension.ky.
The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan is kicking off the new year with a new website to better serve our members and a new administrator's agent that will help fulfill our vision for your pension plan. Our website, chamberpension.ky, features improved web services like a real-time chat to help answer your questions quicker and audio tips to help you plan for your retirement savings arrangement. Our new administrator's agent, Saxon Administration Limited, will benefit members through enhanced systems and IT services, allowing for a greater customer service experience. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you. If you would like to join or request further information, visit chamberpension.ky. And for information as it happens, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Email admin@pensions.ky or call 745-7630.
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community.
Which country is the most likely to set off a global banking crisis? We're going to answer that question today on Money Sense. My name is Emil Kalinowski, and I am broadcasting to you live from the studios of Radio Cayman on 89.9 in Grand Cayman and 93.9 in the sister islands, Cayman Brac and Little Cayman. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to identify one country that has tripped a number of early warning indicators of banking crisis, of a financial crisis. And this country may set off a contagion that will roll over the rest of the world and touch off other nations and their banking systems, their financial systems as well, much like we saw in 2008. Or maybe it'll just be isolated to that one country. How do we know? We don't know if it'll be isolated there, and we don't know if it'll actually take place. But we're going to identify 5 different measures that suggest there will be a banking crisis in this country, not this country, Cayman Islands, but this country that I'm going to name, that I'm keeping secret to keep the ratings up so that you don't go. And those 5 measures suggest that there's a 50% chance of a banking crisis within the next 3 years once you trip one of these early warning indicators. And we're going to go over these early warning indicators. And ladies and gentlemen, all of this is because I was on the social media and someone said, well, you have a nice show and you talk a lot, but I still don't understand what your end game is. What is the end game? Now, where have we heard that phrase before? Perhaps if you've been in the local theater recently and you've seen that documentary about intergalactic superheroes battling space aliens, the Avengers Endgame. If you remember, Doctor Strange at the end of that one episode said, this is what has to be done. We're in the end game now, meaning we're in the final moments of a particular battle. Now, this is in chess. This is very specific. We have one kind of strategy during the opening moves when there are pieces littered all over the board, and then there are different sort of tactics when the pieces have been removed and there's only a few left. This is the end game. Now, it's no coincidence that someone said, well, what is your end game at this particular moment in our human history? They surely wouldn't have asked me this in the early 2000s or the 90s or the 80s or 70s or 60s. Because I think we can all sense that we are in some sort of end of an era. And you'll see this more and more if you take a look around. In fact, on our own island, one of our favorite financial company creations, Real Vision, its co-founder, Grant Williams, has a podcast called The End Game. It's a financial podcast. You can look it up, ladies and gentlemen. And what does he have? He has people come on his show and talk about what their vision is about how this all ends. And it will end because we seem to have come to a climax of our world order, one that was instituted at the end of the Second World War. On the monetary side, they implemented something called Bretton Woods. Recently on the social media channels, there's been a lot of talk about a brand new Bretton Woods brought about by the invasion of the Ukraine by Russia, and Russia's and Ukraine's big reservoir of commodities, where they're not a country that you can just push around and say, well, we're not going to deal with you anymore. No, because they have grain, oil, metals. And so on the social media channels, people are talking about maybe there's going to be a new Bretton Woods. Well, after the Second World War, there was something, the International Monetary Fund was created. The United Nations took over from what was once called the League of Nations. So we had a set of institutions, a set of policies, a set of ways of governing the world, and it all made sense at that time. Serious people, after a serious crisis, constructed serious institutions. And they did their job. But that was 4 generations ago. And it no longer seems to make sense. Lots of things seem not to be making sense. There's crises popping up left and right. And that's why, at least in the financial spaces, there's a lot of talk about the end game and a new beginning, a new world order that will come around. Of course, this is not just restricted to finance, not at all. For those of you that enjoy poetry from the British Empire, well, then you've come across perhaps The Gods of the Copybook Headings by Rudyard Kipling, where he talks about the end of an era and the beginning of a new one. For those of you who aren't interested in reading short poetry, but rather encyclopedic tomes of literature like the Game of Thrones, that same story is there. It's the winter is coming and a new era is coming on the other end of it. For those of you into sci-fi, space aliens and planets, well, in the 1950s, Isaac Asimov wrote something called the Foundation series. And in there we had Harry Seldon crises. In fact, one of the more well-known financial commentators out there, his new, well, not quite new, but his company's name is called Second Foundation. Again, the idea of setting up something new for the era ahead. Now, all that is fantasy and fiction and not real, but of course, much more serious people, historians, have found that there are cycles in human affairs, and perhaps the most famous one is The Fourth Turning, a book by William Strauss. And that book predicted that we would be hitting a crisis sometime in the early 2000s, and that crisis would resolve itself on a social, geopolitical, economic level by the end of the 2020s. And this wasn't just seances. This wasn't built. Neil Howe wasn't just performing as a palm reader, a tarot card reader. No, he was a historian looking back at time and had noticed a rhythm in Anglo-American history that goes back 500 years of these cycles. And we're all feeling it. And in the financial realm, there's a lot of talk of the end game and what might cause the end game to finally begin. Well, a financial crisis, our favorite thing. There's been a lot of them lately. There was one in 2008, the global financial crisis. There was one in 2011 and 12, the European sovereign debt crisis. There was one in their emerging markets, China, Brazil, India, China, in 2014, 15, and 16. And then there was another one, most recently brought about by COVID and the government reactions to it, shutting down entire economies. And that was just 2020. And ladies and gentlemen, would you believe that it seems as if we're moving towards yet another one, our 5th one since 2008? Yes, the invasion of the Ukraine has set off a number And well, it hasn't set off, it's pushed over more dominoes. It's accelerated trends that were already in place and has set off a number of alarm bells. Trouble, commodities are surging, prices are surging. And we're dealing with all this, and it is unsettling, and it's attacking an economic body that is already struggling, trying to come off the mat after being knocked out during 2020 by COVID and the government shutdowns. And so we have a weak global economic body that is now being shocked by surging commodity prices, oil, grains, what else? Metals. And commentators believe that it's only just begun, that the real shock, the socioeconomic humanitarian crisis, is yet to come. Can you imagine? I can't even believe I said that myself, ladies and gentlemen. There's a war taking place, a serious one that's affecting the people of Russia and the Ukraine and the surrounding European continent as refugees are streaming out of the Ukraine, as people are leaving Russia. And yet people believe it's going to be worse. And not just in Europe, but worldwide. Why? I'm sure you've heard of it already. Because both Russia and the Ukraine provide a tremendous amount of the world's food, wheat, grains, and that is not getting out. And so there's serious concern that we are going to see something like what we saw during the 2011 and 12 Mediterranean crisis. Now, in the financial realm, ladies and gentlemen, that was known as the pigs crisis. Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain all saw their sovereign debts become unwelcome. Markets said, wow, wait a minute, you have a tremendous amount of debt on your books, and I don't believe you're going to be able to pay it back. Now, of course, all those countries are right on the Mediterranean. What else is on the Mediterranean, ladies and gentlemen? Right before the pigs crisis was a fire swept through the other side of the Mediterranean, the southern rim, the Arab countries, the Muslim countries. It was called the Arab Spring. Well, it was more like Game of Thrones, winter is coming. It was the Arab winter as a series of revolutions, upheavals, civil disobedience swept through and led to chaos, disorder, the collapse of Libya, the disintegration of Syria. And it was all kicked off because of food prices surging. And that is what we're expected to see again this coming years. And in fact, by some measures, by the UN, they have said that food prices have already breached those highs that we saw in 2010, 2011. Concerns are that we're going to see those kind of food riots again. Now, so all of that is suggesting that the days, months, years ahead are going to be troubled. Could we walk through it? If our economies were in good shape? Yes, absolutely we could. But unfortunately, they're not in good shape. And the best example, lots of different ways we could say that's true, but the best way of saying that that is true is by looking at measures of debt. Now, we're not going to be looking at measures of public debt after the break. We're going to go to a break in a minute, and after the break, we're going to focus on private debt, not public debt, because economic historians, financial historians have gone through the pages of history, and they have noticed that it is public debt that slows down an economy. Too much debt? Look to Italy. Look to the United States. Look to Japan. Their economies slow down terribly. But private debt, debt held by households, debt held by corporations, if that gets to be too much, well, history is littered with examples where too much private debt then leads to a series of financial crises, currency crises, banking crises. And after the break that we're going to enter in just a few seconds, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to name names. We're going to identify 5 measures of private debt and which countries have triggered them, as well as one country that has triggered all 5.
As the longest established pensions plan in the Cayman Islands, the Chamber Pension Plan looks forward to delivering the same strong performance for our members, but now in a new location. As of March 1st, our new pensions operation office is located at 14 Saturn Close, Eastern Avenue, the same building as our new administrator's agent, Saxon Administration Limited. A dedicated and experienced team will be assigned to the Chamber Pension Plan. If you would like to join or request further information, visit chamberpension.ky, and for information as it happens, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Email admin@pensions.ky or call 745-7630. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. New location, new administrator's agent, new customer service, same strong performance.
This is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community. Brought to you by the CFA Society Cayman Islands.
And now, more Money Sense.
Welcome back to Money Sense. My name is Emil Kalinowski. Not only am I broadcasting to you live from the studios of Radio Cayman, but also worldwide on YouTube. Yes, go to the YouTube channel of Radio Cayman, the Radio Cayman channel on YouTube. Go there and you'll be able to see me live. But you'll also be able to see lots of other interesting shows and people throughout the day live. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been talking about The End Game. Not that movie without the superhero space aliens and intergalactic warriors. That was a lot of fun, though. But we're talking about The End Game and how it may be triggered in the financial, socioeconomic, geopolitical realms by a financial crisis emanating from one country that has tripped 5 early warning indicators of too much private debt. And you may be wondering, well, how many early warning indicators are there? 100? No, there are just 5. 5 for 5. Perfect. Although in this case, not the kind of perfect that you want. Okay, so let us begin then. The Bank for International Settlements is one of those organizations that you see in the James Bond movies. They're secretive. We don't know what they're doing. It's high-level international finances in exotic locations. But right, maybe that's just an exaggeration. Maybe that's not really a James Bond movie. They're very nice people, very calm in Switzerland, Basel, Switzerland, and all they do is they look at economic numbers, and they put out good economic reports, so it's not quite as dramatic as James Bond would have you believe. Anyways, the Bank for International Settlements has put out a nice data set whereby they call up all these countries. There's 200 countries, I believe, in the world. They call them all up and they say, can you tell us what your banking information is? Can you tell us what your residential property prices are? How much investment are you receiving from abroad? How much private debt do your households have? How much income is devoted to servicing your private debt? And believe it or not, people answer them in these other countries. Perhaps they want to get a trip to Switzerland, don't we all? So perhaps that's why they answer when the Bank of International Settlements calls. Well, what they do then is they say, let us put all this data together and see whether or not we can predict if a banking crisis will take place if we reach a certain threshold with, let's say, residential property prices. That's a good example, isn't it? Let us look at the inflation-adjusted property price of your entire economy. We'll take a look at your property prices, inflation-adjusted, so we're not going to allow inflation to pump up the value. We're going to look at the real value. And you know what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen? We're not going to look at how you are performing in Singapore or Hong Kong or the Cayman Islands and then compare it to Venezuela or, no offense, Venezuela, or Iraq or Beirut, because obviously those countries should not have very expensive houses compared to small, tiny little islands like Singapore, Hong Kong, and the Cayman Islands. So, what do? We have what do we have? Let me think. I've been thrown off my game, ladies and gentlemen. There are cookies in the radio studio. This is the reason that you should be watching the show live on YouTube, and you would understand why I am having a difficult time keeping my story straight. But, ladies and gentlemen, let's get back to the story. Residential property prices. The Bank for International Settlements will say, if your prices are too high relative to your recent history, in your recent history, let's say 10 years, then there's a 50% chance of a banking crisis within 3 years. And they have done this analysis, and ladies and gentlemen, here are the countries that suggest there might be a crisis because of residential property prices. South Korea, the Czech Republic, Turkey, Russia, Luxembourg, Slovakia, New Zealand, Greece, Netherlands, Croatia, Slovenia, Portugal, Hungary, Spain, Poland, Lithuania, Ireland, Philippines. Keep all those countries in mind. You will notice that one country keeps coming up and up. Here is another measure of potential banking crisis. Measure number 2. It is called credit to GDP gap. And I'd like you to think of this as the stock measure, the reservoir measure. How much private debt is there? How big is the tower? That's what they're looking at. They're not going to be looking at flow. How fast is the flow going, or the river of debt coming in? No. We're just going to be looking at how much private debt do you have in your households, in your corporations, relative to your GDP, your economy. Can your economy service this huge tower of debt? Well, the Bank of International Settlements has said that if you trip this early warning indicator, you will have a 50% chance of crisis within 3 years. And which countries have tripped that indicator? South Korea, Canada, Sweden, Turkey, Norway, Hong Kong, France, Switzerland, China, Chile, Luxembourg, Argentina, Germany, wow, and Brazil. You may have heard some countries mentioned a couple of times now. Okay, that was measure number 2. Measure number 3. Now we're going to talk about the flow, the debt service ratio. Compare this one to what we just discussed with the credit to GDP gap. Here, it's debt service. We all have mortgages. We all have dues, obligations that we owe to somebody. And we are supposed to pay that off with time. So we're servicing that debt. We're supposed to pay interest and a little bit of principal. And so what the Bank of International Settlements says, well, why don't we compare that flow of money for debt, for private debt, compare it to the flow of income? Yes, so how much money are you making as an economy, as a household and corporation? Combine that together and then compare that to how much you have to service your debt. And then what they do is they say, is that ratio, how much you owe versus how much you make, is that ratio above your 20-year rolling average? So they're not just looking at a particular level. They're saying relative to your circumstances, Hong Kong, relative to your circumstances, Macau, Nigeria, Germany, over the last 20 years, are you contributing much, much, much more than you're used to service the debt? See, that's where the crisis might emanate from. If you're used to paying a lot of your income to debt and you've been doing it for 20 years and that's perfectly natural, then you're okay. Your economy's not likely to go off what? Something. Off the seesaw, whatever you're on, you might get off it. The wagon? Okay. What have they found? If you're off your 20-year trend, then it's a warning. And ladies and gentlemen, let me read out the countries again. You might be hearing some countries being named over and over. South Korea, Canada, Sweden, the Czech Republic, Turkey, Norway, Hong Kong, France, Switzerland, Russia, and China. Now, what we just described was for the entire private economy. ladies and gentlemen, they have also done this just for households. They found that this is predictive. This is our fourth measure of banking crisis. We've gone through 3 of them. This is the 4th one. We've got 1 more after this, ladies and gentlemen. Now the Bank of International Settlements is just looking at households, not corporations and households, not the private sector, just households. And they say, does the household have enough income coming in to service its debt? Okay, if it does, good, but relative to its 20-year history, is it much more than usual? And for these countries, these 4 countries, here's our very first funnel, ladies and gentlemen. Previously, I've been mentioning 10, 15 countries. Now I'm only going to mention 4. This is our funnel. We have now narrowed our list of candidates. These 4 countries are servicing their debt at an accelerated and an unusual and elevated pace. Those countries are South Korea, Canada, Sweden, and Norway. One more measure. Thank you, Bank of International Settlements, for not making 10. Otherwise, I would have run out of time during this radio show. The last measure, ladies and gentlemen, is something fancy. What would you expect from bankers in Switzerland? They call it cross-border claims. What does that mean? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. But what it means is money from abroad coming in, funding your economy. Now, I think we've perhaps heard of something called foreign debt in an economy, foreign denominated debt, right? So let's say you are a country. Let's call this country China. And, no, that's a bad example. Let's call this country Sweden. Sweden does not create dollars, U.S. dollars. But let's say they take out a loan in U.S. dollars. That is foreign denominated debt. They're going to have a difficult time, unless their economy is rip-roaring, in servicing foreign denominated dollar debt. Much more difficult than kroner debt, which they can create out of thin air. They're Sweden. They create kroner. So if they ever ran out of kroner to pay for kroner debt, they'll just create it out of thin air. Whereas dollar-denominated debt, that would be much more difficult. So that's foreign denominated debt. And cross-border claims are very similar in that that is money that is due to outside entities, banks that are investing in your country. And if too much money is coming into your country, maybe it's a small country. If too much money is coming in, the Bank for International Settlements is saying, yes, at first this will be great. It will fund all the needed investment, but then it'll start funding things that are non-economic, things that don't make sense. For example, I've always wanted to create a condiment bottle that is half ketchup and half mustard. That'll save a lot of time. Have I ever received funding for this? No, because it's a terrible idea. But if there was a lot of money coming into the country, it would get funded, and eventually it would go bust. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me read the countries that have tripped this early warning indicator. Korea, Canada, the Czech Republic, Chile, Argentina, Slovakia, Germany, New Zealand, and Brazil. All too much money relative to the size of their economy. If you have been keeping track, then there has been one country that has been mentioned every single time, and that country is South Korea. Ladies and gentlemen, South Korea. You wouldn't think it, but they may be on the edge. And this is a very important country. If I remember off the top of my head, they're one of the world's biggest economies, top 10. And this country not only has tripped one indicator, suggesting a 50% of financial crisis in the next 3 years, but all five. Ladies and gentlemen, the world economy got off its knees after being hit by COVID and government shutdowns. And here is another blow coming from the commodity-based inflation surge. Maybe Korea is going to touch off a banking crisis. If not, Canada might. They've rang in four of these early warning indicators. Sweden, the Czech Republic, and Turkey and Norway have all rung in 3. Well, we'll check back in. This radio show will be on again in 2 weeks, and it will be on again every 2 weeks for the next 3 years, and we'll check back in and see if this prediction has come true. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful day. My name's Emil Kalinowski, and this is Money Sense.
Money Sense is brought to you by the Chamber Pension Plan. For further information, visit chamberpension.ky.
The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan is kicking off the new year with a new website to better serve our members and a new administrator's agent that will help fulfill our vision for your pension plan. Our website, chamberpension.ky, features improved web services like a real-time chat to help answer your questions quicker and audio tips to help you plan for your retirement savings arrangement. Our new administrator's agent, Saxon Administration Limited, will benefit members through enhanced systems and IT services, allowing for a greater customer service experience. The Cayman Islands Chamber of Commerce Pension Plan. We're here for you. If you would like to join or request further information, visit chamberpension.ky. And for information as it happens, follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram. Email admin@pensions.ky or call 745-7630.